Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Diana, would you be so kind as to hand me the morning paper? Archie turned to his wife, Diana, sitting in a large, deep armchair next to the fireplace. The man was well into his 50s, but he still looked good and tried to keep as mobile as possible, which, however, did not prevent him from occasionally asking small but nice favors of his wife. Diana was 10 years younger than her husband, but kept a sharp mind and in every way to maintain its lustrous appearance good. The means to do so the couple had. "Of course, darling," Diana said, and then gracefully rose from the long dining table, where she preferred to drink coffee, and gave her husband the morning paper, not failing to shine her new manicure in front of him. "Thank you, my love," Archie replied, smiling dazzlingly. From the outside, it might have seemed that the Stones were a kind of nouveau riche people, trying to live a somewhat pretentious and ostentatious life. But in fact, it was not quite so. The couple really owned a solid business company, engaged in the manufacture of individual furniture to order, but conducted their business honestly from start to finish, caring that the client was satisfied and received his project in detail, in the beautiful execution of cabinetry, and just in time. Business for them was not a simple set of numbers or a method of quick enrichment furniture, in the understanding of the Stones. Equated to a real work of art and served not only exclusively practical purposes, but also aesthetic, creating in the house of the unique atmosphere that could, as if, personify its entire design with the owners themselves, revealing through the furnishings of the house of their character. Although their fortune could not compare with the multi-million-dollar earnings of people from the top lines of the ratings of the magazine Forbes, all the same, the case it gave a fairly stable income, thanks to which, in this Stones were absolutely eualysony. Their family will live in wealth and material well-being for many years. The couple had met over 30 years ago when they were both still at university, and since then, the young people have never parted for a minute. After living so many years soul to soul, the couple Stone learned one simple truth, which, in their opinion, had allowed this union to last so long. When the passions and first love fades to replace them in the family, comes mutual respect and a true, deep understanding of the characters and needs of their partner. Archie and Diana, over the years, have had time to study and accept each other as they are. This, in turn, allowed the couple to avoid not only global quarrels, but also minor misunderstandings that can poison life, no less than the most audacious of treason. Suspicion, lies, subterfuge about this couple Stone never heard, and even, what a sin, proud of their exemplary marriage. But even more than an ideal union, and clearly Violassinomu, favorite business Stone family, was proud of their own son, John. When the child was born, Archie and Diane thought they were the happiest people on the planet. Since John's childhood, he was given a huge amount of attention from his parents. Despite the fact that the couple worked almost around the clock to develop their business, they managed to somehow do without nannies and hired tutors, completely independently engaged in the upbringing and health of their son. Diana never neglected her maternal duties, always finding the opportunity to carve out a little time to study with John or read him a bedtime story. Archie, too, could calmly explain to his associates in the middle of a business meeting that he needed to step away for a moment, to call home and check on the baby. The man always put his family first, so at weekends he tried to spend as much time as possible with his wife and son, playing with the latter and spending pleasant hours with Diana, who at such times always tried to push the conversation away, always tried to put their work together on the back burner. The couple worked in the same company, but headed different departments, so sometimes they did not cross paths in their office for weeks. The years went by quickly, and then Stefan turned from a small, modest boy into a tall, broad-shouldered, handsome man with a lustrous mop of light, blonde hair, a charming smile, and always cheerful, light brown eyes. John took the best of both parents. His father's pleasant, masculine appearance, with his athletic build and his mother's razor-sharp analytical mind, Diana could not be pleased. Watching how cleverly her son solves first crossword puzzles in children's magazines, and then in adult newspapers, and even in collections of the best crossword puzzles in the world, and later on, complex algebra equations which he cracked like peanuts. It is not surprising that with such phenomenal abilities, Stefan decided to enter not anywhere, and the faculty of mathematics. The guy dreamed that, with the help of high-precision measurements, he will be able, in the future, to develop entire algorithms for automated control of complex industrial machinery. Actually, on all the above-mentioned features, the similarity of Stefan with his parents had ended. Contrary to the widespread opinion that in such families the apple does not fall far from the apple, in the Stone family was the exact opposite. Sometimes Archie imagined that their son, at a very early age, accidentally replaced in the maternity hospital. So different was Stefan's character from that of his own parents, and the older the son became, the more vividly these differences became apparent. In this case, it was not about bad habits. Rather, it was a matter of John's special perception of the world around him and his position in it. So, for every opinion of Stone Sour and his wife, the son had his own, often completely opposite point of view. This was especially true of the way Stefan's parents conducted business and about the direct participation of the heir himself in the affairs of the family enterprise. In short, Stefan Zavialov, for all his intelligence, didn't want to become part of his parents' firm. The guy dreamed of supercomputers and calculating linear algorithms, but not about someday heading a company of cabinet makers and taking his father's place in the director's chair. Because of this, the happy family often had conflicts, in the course of which Zavialov Jr. always zealously defended his point of view and was ready to go in this matter literally straight through. Son, you understand, we can't do this without you. Without you in this business. Archie tried to exhort Stefan. This business, it was built by me and your mother for many years, decades you might say. Naturally, I can't put some left-handed person in the director's seat, and I never wanted to. You and only you should take over the reins, son, you understand. Besides, who told you can't run a company with your digital hobby? Check contracts, keep track of materials, control everything, and in your spare time you can do whatever you want. Honestly, I don't see what the problem is here. Stefan's hazel eyes darkened in an instant, not boding well for his parents. Problem? Really? What could be the problem here, Dad? Sarcastically interrogated the young man. By day you assemble tables and chairs for Prenticelis enemy clients, and in the evening, designing rockets? Is that it? Father, don't you think it's physically impossible to combine these things? Physically impossible. John, you're dramatizing this again. Diane intervened. That's not what Dad is saying. He's trying to say that no matter how big your hobby is, and no matter how important it may seem to you today, it could change tomorrow. And you should be prepared that your great math knowledge and analytical skills will never go to waste, because you have a family business to support and develop, and that your father and I will be happy to put in your hands and no one else's. Mom. Her daughter's scream was still in her ears, tearing her eardrums. Mommy. The woman's head darted across the pillow to the right, to the woman's head darted across the pillow to the right, to the left, as if the woman would. So tell me, dear parents, that you have already planned my whole life, how I will live, where I will work. Maybe you also picked up a bride for me in advance. The boy looked at his mother and folded his hands on his chest. His father loudly slammed his palm on the table. Stop talking to your mother like that. I don't understand. Where did you get that stubborn spirit from? We had a normal life, so what happened? What happened? What happened, Father, is that I've grown up. I'm a grown man, damn it. and I have the right to decide for myself how I want to live my life and what I want to do. And yes, I do intend to get married. Just so you know, I'm not going to change my mind." Diana clutched her heart and slowly settled into the chair. "Marry?" she asked weakly, holding the lapel of her tweed jacket. "How?" And she couldn't breathe. "Diana, my dear," Archie cried out, running up to his wife. "What can I get you, please? Water? Valerian? Whoa, Valerian. Whoa, Valerie." Water and valerian. Finally, the wife was able to breathe out. Father of the family immediately rushed to the kitchen. On the way, angrily grabbed his son by the sleeve. "Look what you've brought your mother to. Are you out of your mind? Who would say such things like that? You should have told us on our wedding day. Go and apologize to your mother immediately." What kind of a revolutionary? Archie went to the kitchen to get medicine, and Stefan squatted down in front of his mother and took her hand. His indignation was replaced by concern for Diana's well-being. "Mom, okay? I'm sorry I blurted it out so hastily. I just haven't had a chance to tell you guys about it. You've been going on and on about this internship. Head office, head office. You have to do an internship in our head office. So I had given up hope that you will give me something in this life to decide for myself. And Alice, she's wonderful, you'll see. Alice." Still in the same weak voice, the mother asked, "What Alice?" "The one from Blossom's family of diplomats." A faint hope slipped into the woman's words, but Stefan only shook his head. "No, Mom. Alice Walker. She's from my class, remember? The dark one." Diana's hopes were dashed. "Yeah. Alice Walker. What was that?" "Alice, who came from a family of farmers, from the village." Oh, the young man's mother clutched at her heart again. At that time, her husband arrived with a glass of water in one hand and a bottle of valerian in the other. "Yeah, my love. Come on, I have exactly 12 drops, as the doctor prescribed." The man gave the woman the life-saving medicine, gently holding her back. Diana took a sip and nodded her head toward her son, addressing her husband. "All right, Archie, it's about time. Our son decided to marry a provincial. Everything. Studies, plans, it's all gone. He and his young wife are going to build rockets. Right in the middle of the field. Why? It'll be an interesting collaboration. Promising." Stefan jumped to his feet, once again, staring his mother. "Well, there. That's what I was talking about. You don't let me breathe without analyzing my every move. You, Mom, should have worked in the civil service, in the organs. You'd have all the criminals confess their deeds at once. You wouldn't even have to torture them. Your sarcasm would have done it all for you." "Ah, well, stop the bickering," shouted at his son Zavyalov Sr. "Immediately calm down and explain clearly. What's going on here? What provincial girl? What fields with missiles?" Stefan, breathing more air into his chest, ruffled his wheat hair with his fist and began a detailed story. It turned out that with Alice, their son really met at the university. They were both in their final year, but in different groups. As it turned out, the young man has long been looking at a pretty dark-haired girl with incredibly deep blue eyes, but couldn't quite make the first move. The fact was that Alice Walker always behaved very modestly, and against the background of her other classmates seemed too withdrawn. The girl did not attend general parties, did not go to clubs with the group, and did not go to clubs with the group, and did not tolerate alcohol. Instead, Alice preferred to spend all her free time or in the laboratory, where she tested different formulas and variants of algorithms from her last term paper, or in the library, where she constantly found new books on the subject of her diploma. The student did not hide her scientific ambition. She very much wanted to win the final competition of student works, the main prize of which would be a study in a master's program on a completely free basis. A budget place at the kind of school where Alice and Stefan were studying almost always was a rarity, and there was no need to talk about the master's program. Many students even took a special loan to get the opportunity to study in such a desirable profile for them. That's why winning the competition, like anything else, interested Alice, and she did not intend to be distracted and spend her precious time on anything else but endless study and practice. With John Stone, the girl was brought together by pure chance. One day Alice stayed in the laboratory rooting over the next experiment and accidentally forgot to turn off one clever apparatus, which helped in her work. Outside the window that evening, a thunderstorm was gathering long and hard, and at the moment when the girl was about to leave the study room, there was a sudden flash of lightning in the sky. The electrical charge instantly hit the lightning rod on the roof of the classroom building where the girl was studying at the time. Apparently, the lab's wiring failed, because the next second there was a menacing hissing sound, and the device exploded with a shower of blinding sparks. Alice cried out in surprise and fear, and immediately rushed into the corridor to look for help. At any moment, the fire in the lab was in danger of spreading outside the classroom. And just then, Alice ran into Stefan, who was returning from the last class, thinking on the way about the topic of his future report at the fall conference. The student literally sealed in the guy so that he just miraculously stayed on his feet. Walker. From the surprise, Stefan did not immediately realize that she might not even know that they were studying at the same faculty. "What are you doing here? What happened?" Alice's blue eyes widened involuntarily. "How do you know my name?" "There's a fire. The lab's on fire." Just then, a tangy odor of smoke and burning plastic reached Stefan's sense of smell. On the opposite wall of the corridor began to dance fire glare, and only at this moment, the air around the young people literally shook from the howling of the fire siren. "Were you there alone?" There was no one else. Trying to shout the shrill sound, Stefan asked the girl. She shook her head negatively. The loud sounds frightened Alice, making her, against her will, press herself more tightly against her companion. Stefan put one arm around the girl, and then they hurried to leave the corridor. The firemen arrived 10 minutes later, by which time the lab room had almost completely burned out. After the fire was completely extinguished, the police also arrived on the scene, who, having drawn up a protocol, demanded explanations from Alice. The girl did not hide the fact that the fire started in front of her, and now tried to explain to the police and the rector how exactly it happened. The rector was, to put it mildly, not happy about what had happened. He was now only interested in who would cover the cost of repairing the lab and the equipment inside. "Alice, do you have any idea how much all this stuff cost?" "Just a rough estimate, huh? There was equipment, the price of which was tens of thousands of dollars. Who will buy us a new one now? Maybe you, or maybe you, or maybe you, or maybe your farming parents?" The girl sank down and stood in front of the rector with her head down. She knew perfectly well that the sum he had mentioned. Stefan, who knew that the girl's parents were modest and could not afford to cover even a tenth of the expenses, boldly stepped forward. "Let me help fix everything. I can give the money in installments as the rebuilding progresses." The rector opened his mouth to object, but at that moment the fire chief approached them. The fire brigade chief, who had arrived to investigate the incident, approached them. "You're counting students' money for nothing, Alexander," he began after greeting them. "The case is an insurance case. The wiring should have been changed a long time ago. The fire would have occurred under any scenario, even if the girl had turned off the appliance. The network was simply unable to cope with the tenfold increase in load." Alexander squinted unpleasantly, but had to agree with the fireman's arguments. "The wiring in this building has not been changed for many years." Stefan and Alice finally let go. The rector limited himself to a strict reprimand to the students, and the next day, the administration of the institution held a large extraordinary meeting at which they detailed briefing on fire safety. Alice was pleasantly impressed by the way Stefan stood up for her in front of the rector, and from that moment on, the two young people began a pleasant acquaintance, which soon developed first into friendship. They were both very keen on science, and then into something more, and then something more. The affair lasted about 6 months, before Stefan finally decided to propose to Alice. And now, embarrassed and stammering in the most emotional places, he was telling his parents about it. So what's that supposed to mean? You've been dating for 6 months, and you, for all this time, not even a single word, not a single hint, did not mention that you have a girlfriend? Diana lamented. Son, well, you're just like a knife in my heart stabbed. To my family, the most dear people, and said nothing. Yes, Stefan, it's not good, Archie muttered after his mother. I don't argue, you probably have a good girl. But why get married in the first place? We could have gone out for a year or two, met. A lot of couples do that nowadays. Test their feelings, see how they feel. Stefan once again apologized to his mother and father, but now he looked more concerned, rather than guilty of his secret. What is there to check, Dad? You and Mom, when you started dating, did you spend 2 years feeling the same way? Zavyalovsa only remained silent. Same here. Anyway, what I wanted to say is, Mom, Dad, you're invited to dinner by Alice's parents. They want to get acquainted, because they're in-laws after all. And you'll get to see Alice. You'll like her a lot, I promise. Diana looked anxiously at her husband. He also looked at her confusedly. Now they have to act as matchmakers. It's a good thing, isn't it? Give me some more valerian, Archie, she asked in a colorless voice, and then leaned back in her chair. The dinner at the bride's parents' house was scheduled for 2 days later. On Sunday evening, the two families would meet at Alice's house to get acquainted and discuss the details of the wedding. No, Archie. I'm not going to live through this, Archie, Diana complained. I'd only seen a glimpse of Alice, of course, at the general meeting of the university community. She was a pretty little thing, but mark my word, we'll cry with her and her parents. Provincials, what are they like? All they care about, to get a bigger piece of the action here in the capital. Stefan says she's an excellent student. She dreams of a master's degree. Science. Maybe so. I don't dispute it. But that's the only reason why she's dreaming, because she wants to get a foothold. Yes, and R1. She only needs R1 as an anchor. If she's so smart, she must have some kind of plan. And her parents... Diana, why are you so categorical in your opinion about Alice? The father of the family tried to soften the heated atmosphere. Do you think our son is so stupid that he will allow himself to be fooled, like the last major? The couple were in their bedroom getting ready for bed. Archie was checking the economic news on his laptop, as he always did, and Diana was sitting in front of the mirror, applying a refreshing facial moisturizer to her face. All she could think about was how cleverly the faceless Alice Walker was ready to ensnare their son. My dear, our son is first and foremost, is a man. And that's a fait accompli, I'm sorry. Think back to when you were his age. How much thought did you give to chasing after a pretty girl? Archie closed the lid of his laptop, looking skeptically at his wife over his reading glasses. I didn't have time for, as you put it, pretty girls, he said in a low voice. I was working in a furniture factory while I was at university, where you and I met, by the way. So, the only girl in my life has always been, and still is, you, my dear. Diana turned around, slyly looking at her husband. Oh, flatterer, what a flatterer. Always find what word to say to a woman to make her melt. But let's get back to our sheep. That is, to Alice. The husband rolled his eyes quietly without his wife seeing. He realized that his son had not chosen the most enviable bride, but it was still his choice. There was nothing he could do about it. Her parents are probably some drunkards from the village. I know what I'm talking about. God, how many of them I've seen on business trips. One thing about farmers, they cover themselves with a nice foreign name, but they still drink and still drink. And the only farming they have, only potatoes and zucchini, the woman concluded, smearing cream on her hands. So now we have to be related to these Alkanauts. No way. Their daughter is a piranha, of course. But I'm a shark, you know. I'm a bigger shark than most. The businessman just sighed. What do you suggest? I mean, we can't just ignore their invitation. And ignore their invitation. And if they then, God forbid, in the press about this denounce, what will people say about us? Diana moved to the bed, closer to her husband, and defiantly closed the lid of his portable computer. And about this, my dear, you and I will think now, she murmured. Stones, not the last people in town, and with the hillbillies we in mesalliance with categorically contraindicated. Therefore, we must come up with something, so that these provincials will run away from us like fire. Then it should be something, well, very unusual, suggested the businessman. They should be so hooked that they then went in shock for a week. Diana suddenly squinted. She clearly had some interesting idea, which she hurried to share with her husband. Why? It's an idea. You can beat the wedge out of the wedge out of the wedge, as they say. Jacob and Elizabeth Walker were preparing a big dinner party for their matchmakers, whom they were to meet this Sunday. It was to be a big dinner party, not to make a mess of their future in-laws. So they had the help of their daughter, Alice, and their future son-in-law, Stefan Zavialov. Sergei, do you think I should order duck from Paramount from the market, or should I buy it at the supermarket? The meat is prosodilno, in the oven can, and dry out. If the quality isn't good, Alice's mother worried. She wanted very much to impress the rich matchmakers. Stefan did not hide from the bride and her parents the fact that his parents were quite wealthy. Jacob, meanwhile, was making his own wine list, looking at the offerings of specialty stores on a large website devoted to the local wine industry. He wanted to buy a couple bottles of red for dinner, but he couldn't decide on the best value for money. Of course, at the market, Elizabeth. Without thinking, responded her husband. Have you already ordered Paramono bird? Look, he does not immediately bring it. The wife shrieked and rushed to call the merchant, and Alice and Stefan, while sitting in the kitchen, continued to prepare the menu of appetizers and salads. The dinner had to be perfect, and the couple was determined to achieve it at any cost, even if they had to go broke on a couple of avocados and a whole pineapple. Alice's parents were indeed farmers from the province. Walker's family, after a long life in the village, was able to save a small amount of money to settle in the city and finally relax. They were able to afford to buy a small house on the outskirts of the city with an adjacent plot of land on a couple of acres, where Elizabeth built a small vegetable garden for herself and her daughter, and Jacob was able to put the long-awaited barbecue on which he planned to rotate kebabs. All year round. Previously, he simply did not have enough time for it. When asked why they decided to move to the capital now, the Walker couple always replied that they had already lived in the village long enough to get tired. They said because of their age, Jacob was already well over 60, while his wife had just celebrated her 50th birthday. Alice was a late child. Perhaps that was why she wanted to get as much out of higher education as possible. She realized that it was her turn to take care of her parents, and that would require a lot of money, which she could only get by excelling in her studies. Only by excelling in her studies and later in a high-paying job in advanced technology. Otherwise, the Walker family behaved very discreetly, even a little secretive. They didn't talk much about how they became farmers. Stefan only knew that they worked very hard on the land, and they had their own cattle, which, due to age, the couple was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. After their daughter graduated from high school, the family decided to sell off what was left of the farm and use the proceeds to move to the city. Here, they had only recently felt like real townspeople. slowly adapting and getting used to the accelerated pace of life in the capital. Sunday morning came. Stefan came to Alice's house in advance to help her and her parents set the table and prepare some dishes for serving. When everything was ready, the young couple couldn't help but remark, the table looked perfect. In the middle stood a huge dish with cut, beautiful slices of fruit, the crown of which was a huge golden pineapple, towering like a flagpole above all the other dishes. 3 kinds of salads beautifully arranged in layers in porcelain salad bowls with an elegant oriental pattern were given to the upcoming guests to choose from. Besides, on the table there were several smaller plates with appetizers and 3 bottles of fine red and white wine, personally chosen by the owner of the house for the arrival of future relatives. The finale of this belly feast was to be the very same Peking duck, languishing at that moment in the oven, and a large caramel chocolate cake, carefully cooled in the refrigerator, as it was handmade by Elizabeth herself using the family's signature recipe. The meeting was set for 6 in the evening. I had to hand it to Alice's parents. Jacob wore his best suit, complete with new leather boots, and his wife wore a very stylish dress, reminiscent of the 50s, but more modern and austere. In a word, to the meeting of matchmakers, the Walkers were ready and all armed. However, unlike the parents of the bride, Stones made completely different plans, the main of which was to prevent a possible mésalliance by any means at their disposal. That evening, the couple have long discussed various options for how they can forever turn their Stefan away from this careless family Walker, led by their predator daughter. In the end, in their heads there matured a plan, the originality of which could envy the Trojan horse of the ancient Greeks, wishing to finally divorce the son with the bride, who, in their understanding, belonged to a much less prestigious social stratum. The couple decided to come to the meeting in the oldest, rather shabby rags, which, and to take to the cottage was a pity. It was so decrepit. The calculation of the groom's parents was as follows. Pretending to be the last of the poor, Archie and Diana would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They would make a fool of their son in front of Alice, who, as the mother thought, was probably already counting their money in her and her husband's mind, and scare off the hated matchmakers, for they knew that their future son-in-law was the heir to a furniture empire. "Imagine Archie," said Diana happily, twirling in front of the mirror and looking at her reflection. "They'll see us and realize at once that, first of all, they'll realize that they've been duped by John, that he's not a rich man. So there's no point in pretending to us, and they'll show their real face, their selfish intentions. And secondly, what?" impatiently asked my husband, who did not like the whole idea very much. "And secondly, they will immediately become clear that to take from us nothing. And then this Alice herself will get away from our son, like a dried-up bath leaf." Diana deftly snapped her fingers, as if to strengthen her words, and then looked at her watch. "Well, we can start. The time is just right." Having thrown a last glance at herself in the mirror, the businesswoman smiled gloatingly. The Stones deliberately didn't show up on time. They didn't want to impress the hostile party as punctual, polite people, so they deliberately delayed the start of their acquaintance. Stefan was sitting on pins and needles. He had never been so ashamed of his father's and mother's behavior when he tried to call them. Every time he heard the same thing. The device is temporarily out of service or out of range. Alice tried unsuccessfully to calm the boy down. "Calm down, John. Don't be so nervous. Maybe your relatives have some urgent business to attend to. You said they're very busy people." "But not to that extent," shook his head young man. And there was no such thing before that they turned off the phone if they went to a meeting. They couldn't both have run out of cell phone power, honestly. Stefan got up from the table and tried to call his parents again. It was useless. The son of businessman felt in his gut. His ancestors are clearly up to something wrong. But what? Or maybe, "Sorry, Stefan." Something suddenly happened to them. Saying these words out loud, Elizaveta mentally scolded herself. Well, now, for goodness sake. I'll frighten the guy completely. Will run away from us. Mom. Alice looked at her mother reproachfully. She was also on her feet. She was stroking Stefan's nervous arm. At that moment, the doorbell rang. A little over an hour had passed since the appointed time. Oh, thank God, Jacob exclaimed and hurried down the hallway to open the doors and let them in for a long time. To open the doors and let the long-awaited guests in. A moment later, there was silence in the hallway. Stefan, feeling a nasty sucking sensation under his throat, rushed to meet his parents and was stunned. Looking at his mother's and father's clothes, Stefan felt a slight dizziness. Alice, standing next to him, noticed how sharply her fiancé had turned pale. "Introduce us to your sweetheart." Carefully imitating the joy in her voice, Diana spread her arms in a welcoming embrace and immediately threw herself on the bride's father's neck. Kissing him roughly on both cheeks, she finally noticed Alice. "Oh, and you. So you are Alice and is. How lovely. Let's hug too. Can I call you daughter?" Stefan felt as if he had been plunged into ice, cold water. His ears ached and his lungs suddenly lacked oxygen. Alice hugged her future mother-in-law politely, said hello to Archie, and they, along with Jacob, led everyone into the living room, escorted everyone into the living room. Stefan was shocked not so much by his mother's over-the-top behavior as by her appearance. She and his father were dressed as if they were about to go to the pier to beg for alms. Diana wore some decrepit, faded dress over which she was not shy to throw, over which she had not hesitated to throw an even older and more dilapidated robe. Instead of tights, she wore dark blue gaiters on her feet, the kind one usually wears to beat the carpet in the morning. Instead of the luxurious shoes a woman was used to wearing, his mother's feet were shod in old rubber boots. Stephen was willing to bet that underneath them, tattered socks, though the boy couldn't even imagine where his parents could have been wearing so many old rags. His father was also good, an old tracksuit, sweatpants with bubbles on the knees and high fishing boots. Stone Sir proudly wore a big summer Panama on his head, just like an urban lunatic, no less. Stefan, with a mute question in his eyes, stared at his parents, but they behaved as if nothing had happened, as if they dressed like that every day. Diana began to ask Elizabeth and Alice the strangest and most uncomfortable questions she could think of, and Archie kept insinuating to Jacob that he could have drunk more for the health of the young. And in the village, isn't that the custom? The atmosphere of friendliness was kept solely at the expense of the bride's parents, while Stefan soon began to resemble a dummy twitching in his chair, unable to change anything in the current situation. "Oh, and this bird you have," looking at the smoking turkey, Diana cooed. "You probably butchered it yourself, didn't you? It's not the first time you've taken a bird's life, is it? How do you think it felt?" Alice could barely restrain herself from laughing, but Stephen almost choked on his salad at those words. "Mom, where did you get that from?" He looked at his mother with a mixture of bitterness and indignation. "It's all right." Elizabeth tried to diffuse the situation, then smiled sweetly at Stone. "I didn't personally slaughter the bird. It was bought by me at the market as an ordinary chicken. When we had a farm, I sometimes had to let the birds go to meat, but it's a very different process. It's a lot less emotional and a lot more technical, isn't it?" "I hope I've answered your question." "Very thoroughly, thank you," Diana said, wrinkling her nose. The level of nervousness and mutual incomprehension continued to rise slowly. The further away, the more absurd the speech of the groom's parents became. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and her husband looked at each other, wondering what motives Diana was pursuing, having dressed for dinner as a homeless woman without 5 minutes, but having, at the same time, on her hands, but with a gorgeous shellac manicure on her hands. Did she really think that her $500 purse, now forgotten on the hallway nightstand, wouldn't catch anyone's eye, and neither would her husband's expensive watch? which he tried to hide in the sleeves of his shabby tracksuit. The Walkers, of course, immediately realized that everything was going on, including the inappropriate behavior of the Matchmakers, was just a prank. The only thing they did not understand was the purpose of the joke. Anyway, parents of the bride did not want to spoil relations with Stone Eye at the stage of acquaintance, and therefore tried to treat their extravagant act with all their inherent understanding. Stefan, who was shocked by his parents' prank, noted to himself, "The behavior of his future mother-in-law and father-in-law is worthy of real respect." Others in their place would have long ago thrown out the careless Matchmakers. The Walkers, on the other hand, behaved as calmly and honorably as possible throughout the evening. After all, they even called their future-in-laws a cab when they complained that they had no money at all. "Jacob, we wish we had a place like yours." "Oh." Archie jokingly patted Jacob on the shoulder. "But alas, we can't all roast turkeys or knead cakes." "It's true," Diana said, mimicking her husband. "I don't even have enough money for the streetcar fare." "Thank you for inviting us, my dears. Now we'll see each other all the time." The woman smiled dazzlingly at Elizaveta, who almost twitched from this smile, which seemed a little predatory, but she was still able to restrain her emotions. "You are always welcome," she said, and then went to the room to order a taxi for the Matchmakers, to order a cab for the Matchmakers. When the parents of the groom left, Stefan, going after them, apologized to Walker for the behavior of his mother and father, and then stayed a little longer to talk to Alice. "Alice, you apologized to me too. I don't understand what's gotten into them. They're completely different. Obviously they wanted to stand out in front of your family. But this..." Alice only laughed quietly, hugging her lover. "Don't worry. You don't know what the elders have in their heads sometimes. Maybe they are so jealous of you to me. The main thing we found out today. Your mother has a great sense of humor. I have not laughed so much for a month, honestly." The bride assured the boy that nothing would change in their relationship, despite the dinner embarrassment, as long as he felt safe and secure around Alice and her parents. "As long as you're not embarrassed of me." "Everything's fine," she told him honestly. "The rest will somehow settle." "Alice, you're my best." Stefan exhaled and kissed her softly, then hurried downstairs, following his eccentric family. The Stephen did not utter a single word in the cab, but glanced glumly at his father and mother, who by that time had already gone out of character, and, seeing his son's mood, also preferred his son's mood. Seeing their son's mood, also preferred to spend the rest of the road in silence. Diana was very glad in her heart. It seemed to her that her number had produced the desired effect on Walker. Now, they themselves would hurry to dissociate from such relatives as the Stones could become, and their daughter, in turn, would begin to look for a new, even richer victim. Archie was quite satisfied with his game. He liked his son's bride, of course, and her parents appeared to be quite decent people, but a poor house like the Walker family's would be hard to find. How were they all going to live there? Of course, the wife was right. The bride's parents would want to move to the Stones' luxurious estate at the first opportunity. Only now they would not be able to do it. The father of the family was counting on the fact that Alice's father and mother, recognizing the parents of the groom as poorer than they were, would come to their senses and would not want to live there, would come to their senses and not want to breed poverty. Zavialov Sr. hoped that the Walkers could dissuade their daughter from a hasty and no one needs a wedding. None of the parents did not think at that moment what it was at that time their son. Stefan was really very worried about the impression that his mother and father had on his white parents, and therefore could not wait for the moment when they would be within the walls of their home to finally dot all the I's. Late that night, there was a real scandal in the Stone household. "Oh my God, I can't believe you'd do such a thing. I love her," Stefan shouted in anger. The boy's mother stood in the middle of the room with her arms folded across her chest, just as her son had done not so long ago. Stefan, calm down now, son. We did all this for your sake, didn't we? To protect you from the evil influence of this family. What are you talking about, Mom? What influence? You should have been dragged out of there by the collar. You were acting like two crazy people. The guy was pacing the room, waving his hands at every sentence. You'd better be careful with your words, son, the father threatened. I don't doubt that we may have gone a little overboard somewhere, but it was necessary. Have you seen how they live? I wouldn't be surprised if in a month the ceiling collapses on their heads at night. The place is in a state of total disrepair. So what? Where do you think they'll run to if that happens? To us, of course. And even if they do, so what? Are my wife's parents not worthy of sheltering in a cabinet maker's house? Or am I completely out of my depth and only members of the royal family are allowed to stay here? Diana theatrically clasped her hands. Come to your senses, son. Have you seen your Alice, so to speak, with the naked eye? No. But I have. I've been watching her all evening, and I want to tell you this. Your Alice is a cunt. Don't you talk about her like that, Mom? Dad, she's okay. But what about you? Do you also think that your behavior at Walker's is normal? Zavialo Sr. thought for a moment before answering. After all, he was a respectable man, and such pranks could have a bad effect on his business reputation. In the end, he said, Stefan, I'm sorry, of course. Alice is no match for you. Your mother's right. I'm not saying that she's bad. I'm just stating a fact. You're from different worlds, son. Different layers of the social pie, if you want to put it that way. The boy's frozen like a stone. He didn't expect such a betrayal from his family. Well then, I'm from the other world too. Father, I'm leaving. I'm gonna live at Walker's with Alice in their emergency housing. Are you kidding me? Well, let's see how many days you'll come running back, son, the mother said. Unless they feed you turkey every day. As soon as those words rolled off her tongue, Diana immediately regretted what she had said. Her son looked at her with genuine contempt. I'd rather live with simple but honest farmers and the girl I love than to live under the same roof with snobs like you. The mother pressed her palm to her face in surprise, and the father, on the contrary, suddenly became furious. How dare you call us that? Your mother and I have done everything to give you the best of everything. The best toys, the best education, the best prospects. Keep in mind, Stefan, if you leave now, you won't get a penny of your inheritance. I'd rather give it all away to orphanages than feed some beggars. Not a single vein trembled on my son's stony face. Well, give it away. Give it all to the children. Maybe then, and really then, some good will come of this money. It's all tables and chairs, really. The poor bastard goes to live with an unwanted farmer fiancé. Finita la comedy. With these words, Stefan bowed jokingly to his parents and, cursed by his father, quickly disappeared behind the doors of the manor. At that moment, Diana regretted for the first time in all her time what she had done with her son's life. However, nothing she had done, the woman could no longer change. For a while she stood in the middle of the living room, listening to her husband cursing at Stefan, and then slowly retreated to her bedroom. It took her a few hours to realize that they might never see their beloved child again. Despite all the protests of her parents, Stefan and Alice's wedding took place. Exactly 1 month after the young Zavialov left his father's house, in a modest cottage, Walker celebrated a quiet but beautiful celebration. The house was decorated with many colorful balloons and real wildflowers. Alice loved them, even though the wedding didn't look as luxurious as it could have been. If Stefan had the money of his parents, but the general atmosphere of the festivities was favorable to himself. Home cooking, friendly, and so simple relatives of his young wife. Nice sit downs in the summer kitchen to the sound of a 6-string guitar, good old songs about people and their sincere love in the difficult post-war time. It is difficult to say what in all this touched Stefan most of all. Soulfulness of the general atmosphere. or the pulling feeling of regret in the depths of his heart. The only ones who were not among the guests of his and Alice's house that day were his parents, as hard as it was to admit. Stefan still missed his father and mother here. He would have loved to share with them this wonderful moment of his own growing up, to see the tears in Diana's eyes and the smile of encouragement on Archie's face, but alas, they had made their own choice. 3 weeks before the ceremony, the Stones received a written invitation to their son's wedding in the mail. A simple envelope of heavy paper and a cheap card with white lies on it failed to convince the father that his son had grown up. In the end, even though the mother wanted to go to the wedding and forgive everything to her bad John, Archie decided otherwise. It's all right. Let him suffer a little. It's good for him, the businessman said in an iron voice, and crumpled the thin card in his strong fist. He wanted independence, freedom. Well, let him enjoy it, without our participation. So it turned out that the parents simply ignored Stefan's invitation, deciding thus to teach him a lesson. They still hoped he'd come to his senses and leave his compromising fiancée and return home at the last moment, back to the family nest. But 1 month passed, then another, then another, then another, and the prodigal son never returned. Trouble came when he wasn't expecting it. One day, Archie had an unfortunate swim in the pool and managed to catch bilateral pneumonia. The disease developed rapidly and in a few days literally baked the unfortunate businessman, feeling that he could not cope with the disease overpowering him. The man still decided to lie down for long-term treatment in a private clinic, where he promised to put on his feet. But only a miracle, even for a very large amount of money, and did not happen. The condition of Stone Sr. every day only worsened. Then the doctors were forced to put him in an induced coma. Diana found herself all alone, face to face with her husband's business, and here the woman is not on a joke scared. The moment came when her husband's business, and her entire family's, really had no one to hand over to. There were no suitable candidates, even for temporary management of the company, and the ones that were available didn't have the professionalism Stone needed. The businesswoman was forced to put all production on pause. She hoped to somehow hold out until her husband will not get better. Unfortunately, as often happens in such situations, the forced downtime of the company was immediately used by Archie's unscrupulous partners. At the General Board of Directors, the general owner of the company was decided to recognize temporarily incapacitated, which meant that any of the owners of shares from among the managers of the company could safely sell their shares and profitably get out of the unprofitable business. As you know, sharks are the first to smell blood, and so, in just a couple of months, the company was completely stripped and sold off, leaving the Stones' prestigious business completely empty. Diane tried to fight as long as she could. She contacted all of her husband's friends and business associates who, only a couple of years ago, proudly claimed to be acquainted with the Stone family. Now, however, things had changed. No one wanted to hear about the businessman lying in a coma and had almost no prospects for recovery. It didn't take long for the woman to realize that her family was completely broke. There was barely enough money to pay the bills on the house, but even that was in danger of running out at any moment. At the same time, Archie's medical debts were mounting, and soon Diana was forced to remortgage their beautiful home, just to be able to keep her husband alive. It was only now that the impoverished businesswoman realized the true cost of her cherished friendship of the elites and praised mutual assistance, which in fact turned out to be an empty sound. As Diana sat on the alessanda of her foreclosed house, bitterly lamenting the fate that had treated her so unjustly, her cell phone suddenly rang in her jacket pocket. "Hello," she sobbed into the receiver. "Who is this?" "Diana, it's Elizabeth calling you." "Your son's wife, Alice's mom. Remember her? You asked me about the turkey at the dinner party?" For a moment there was silence on the phone, and then Stefan's mother literally howled into the phone. "Of course, Of course I remember you. Elizaveta, my dear. How are you? How's John? Oh God, if you only knew what's been happening here. That's why we're calling Diane. Jacob took the phone from his wife. We're aware of the trouble you're in. You just wait. We'll be here soon, and we'll bring Stefan and Alice. Enough of holding grudges against each other. Rejoiced and grateful. The woman cried again, so Elizaveta had to comfort her emotional relative again. A couple of hours later, a huge pearl gray SUV pulled up to the Stones estate. Diane thought at first her eyes were failing her or someone had accidentally gotten the wrong address. But nothing could convey her surprise when, behind the wheel of the expensive vehicle, she recognized her sister-in-law's parents. A second later, Alice and her husband easily slipped out of the car and rushed to her mother. Mommy, I'm so happy to see you. Forgive me for being stubborn, but I love you both so much. Stefan embraced his mother, covering her hot face with soully kisses, but she only clutched him in her arms as tightly as her already old age allowed her. As tightly as her old arms would let her. John, my boy, she whispered back. Finally, when mother and son were able to pull away from each other, it was time for Diana to apologize to Alice and her parents. Pardon me for all this masquerade. I was quite stupid then, though here is the age already. But I guess God didn't give me the wisdom to know what's gold and where guilt. Fortunately, the matchmakers didn't hold a grudge against her. They came specially to help her and her husband in their trouble, and at the same time to reconcile, forgetting all their offenses, and rejoice together in the happiness of their children. Come on, Diane, Jacob said, waving at her. You know, it's a good idea to let bygones be bygones. Why don't you tell me what's happened here, that you're without a home? I've learned a little from my channels, about Archie being in a coma, and about how you've got a house on the line. But I'd like a little more detail, so I'd know how to help you. The woman was very surprised at this turn. She looked questioningly at her son and daughter-in-law, but they just smiled. I'll tell you about it, of course. But what can you do for me, Jacob? With all due respect, it's a very nice car, but... By the way, where did you get it? The walkers only grinned, sensing the curiosity in their relative's voice. It turned out that, although they were farmers, but on their accounts had a multi-million-dollar fortune. For many years, the Walker family owned a meat concern for the production and procurement of various types of meat. Few people knew that the meat kings are not accustomed to boast of their wealth, skillfully playing the role of simple-minded natives of the village. Keeping in the shadows, they, however, all these years successfully conducted their business, and in the same way accustomed a native daughter. Alice was accustomed from childhood to rely solely on her knowledge, because she knew that money is a very fickle thing, and at any moment, at the slightest mistake, there can be nothing left. That was why she was so touched by Stefan's offer to pay for the laboratory destroyed in the fire. The rector of the university was one of the few people who knew very well what family Alice Walker came from, where Alice Walker came from. She could have paid off the repairs to the laboratory with just one payment, but the rector would have thought of something else to shake the rich student out of even more money. Stefan's unselfishness and his sincere willingness to help suggested to the girl that she could always rely on this man, no matter how much money she had. Diana was frankly shocked by the story of Alice and her relatives. It turns out that it was they who fooled the family of cabinet makers with their modesty and simplicity, and not vice versa. She thanked God and fate itself for sending such wonderful and caring people to help her, and immediately repented of her own intolerance and snobbery. Having embraced and forgiven each other, the matchmakers began to act. First of all, the Walkers paid for Archie's operation, which was successful and allowed to bring the man out of a medically induced coma. The businessman was quite surprised to hear the side of his wife and newfound relatives. After learning that the matchmakers really saved his life, Zavialov also repented and sincerely apologized to his sister-in-law's family. After that, the Meat Kings threw all their energy, connections, and a lot of money to rebuild Stone's business. Archie, who was at this time in long-term rehabilitation, as he could for his part, help to pull his own business out of bankruptcy. Of course, a lot of things were irretrievably destroyed, but they still managed to restore something. Now the spouses have a much smaller company, which helps them learn to live within their means and value every earned ruble more than before. But with their relatives, the Stones maintain the most reverent and kind relationship. They often visit each other and do not hesitate to receive Walker in their own, now more compact cottage, which, incidentally, is built right next to the children's home. In addition, both families are now expecting a new miracle, which should happen in the next 9 months. Alice turned out to be pregnant and will soon give her parents and parents of her favorite husband a wonderful grandson or granddaughter. The girl has not had an ultrasound yet, so everyone is in for a big surprise.